Hello, welcome to Politricking with Tshidi Madia. That's right. My name is Tshidi Madia. This is episode 2 of season 3 of a politics podcast brought to you by Eyewitness News. There's lots of talk in recent days about a national shutdown. It's taken place. The jury is out on whether or not it was a success. And I'll tell you why. So the Red Berets will say it's a success. And to a degree, I agree with them because they dominated headlines, the narrative. All we could talk about was this shutdown. And it wasn't necessarily a success in that when you change your language about your event, that says something. You're shifting the goalpost, right? So it went from being, this great shutdown to, this great stay away to, government threatened buses to, people did what we wanted them to do. They stayed away from work. That's not necessarily how the picture unfolded. So in terms of the EFF's traditional mobilizing ways, it's English, So in terms of how they naturally often mobilize, I don't think it met the standards. We were arguing amongst ourselves about whether it was hundreds of people or just over 1,000. That's really bizarre for me, who's covered the EFF for all of 10 years that it's been around. But did they make headlines? Absolutely. We spoke about them. I'm speaking about them now. So when you look at it from that perspective, absolutely. The temperature check that it was meant to be for Julius Malema, I don't think it checked out. I think he must recognize that he must go to the drawing board. Part and parcel of what any political leader needs to do, part of what every political leader needs to do when elections approach, and we are fast approaching the general elections in 2024, is to gauge what their chances will be. So he's leading a party that people have been saying is plateauing. There's a lot of young people who will make up the electorate that you need to inspire to get to the polls. He needs to speak to that electorate because, he's the youthful party. He's quite militant. And if he can't capture their imagination, then I imagine the EFF is in a little bit of trouble. So I don't necessarily think that he managed to do that the way that I think he would have envisioned it, the way that he would have wanted it. So I do think that this is an opportunity for them to go back to the drawing board and see what else is to be done. Mind you, the issues that they raise, guys, are crucial, are critical. We have a crisis of leadership on our hands as far as our government is concerned. But I move on. This conversation I've kind of been excited about since we said this guest and I promised each other to have this conversation. I think my guest this week, her name is linked to a bit of controversy in the country. She doesn't speak quite often, but if I jog your memory, not too far, just to Nazareth, you'll remember how her name came from the floor. And people were like, she's still a factor in the day-to-day politics of the ANC. And of course, when you hear her name, you'll think about things like oil reserves. You'll definitely think about a nuclear deal, right? And you must hold on to the thought around the nuclear deal because you must think about testimony put forward by former Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. You must think about her in that context. And we're going to try and understand what actually transpired during that period. The reason why I'm doing this, because she's just been cleared by the Ethics Committee in Parliament of any wrongdoing with regards to that nuclear deal. Remember, there was a whole period where former President Jacob Zuma was like, people are against this nuclear deal. So we're having a conversation around that. Have you guessed the guest yet? I'm joined now by Tina Joemat-Peterson. Tina, thank you so much for coming to see us. You actually came all the way to Johannesburg to see us. Thank you so much. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much, Tshidi, and thank you very much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. I'd like to be quite frank about this. It's been 10 years since I've been crucified about a nuclear deal that I had signed. And no matter what I said, I'd also be guilty. I'd be corrupt. The most difficult part of it was that my name was tarnished and my reputation was dragged through the mud. I became this villain, and no matter where I went, I was always perceived as being corrupt.
Let's go back to the issue of the Ethics Committee, because it cleared you this month. I saw the letter from Parliament that's sent to you saying you've been cleared by the Ethics Committee. What were you cleared of specifically? Let's speak about just the letter and what you went to Parliament for, because you went after the State Capture Commission, after Nene's testimony before Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. Am I correct?
Absolutely. I was called to the Ethics Committee because of the process after the Zondo Commission and Parliament then dealing with the outcome of the Zondo Commission. I'd like to thank the Speaker for referring the matter to the Ethics Committee, and I'd also like to thank the Ethics Committee for the manner in which they dealt with this. I was not called to the Zondo Commission. I was not found guilty of anything at the Zondo Commission. Former Minister Nene alleged that I had tried to force him to sign a letter to procure nuclear. These allegations were rather disappointing and disrespectful. So the UFA meeting was a state visit, and we were part of the delegation of President Zuma. So when you have a state visit and the President Zuma leads a delegation, he then communicates directly with his counterpart, which was then President Putin. There's no way legally or even in terms of any protocol that a minister or two ministers can sign a letter to another president. It just doesn't happen. It's irrational. It's totally irrational. So for Minister Nene to have expected or to have perceived me as having tried to force him was really bizarre. It was completely ridiculous. Firstly, I've been an MEC for 15 years. I'd been a minister for 5 years. I know the PFMA. I know what procurement is all about. I knew it then as I know it now. A minister to threaten or try to force a minister of finance to sign a letter is outlandish. Any minister would know that a minister of finance decides on your budget. So if you try and threaten a minister of finance, you would really be idiotical.
Why is it that he read it though that way? Why is it that to Nhlanhla Nene, it felt like you were forcing his hand?
Minister Nene was extremely anxious when he arrived in Ufa, Russia. And he came there with a view that we would be expected to sign this letter. And this was these were kind of messages that were portrayed in the media. So if you come there believing what is suggested you're going to do, and you actually believe that you are going to do it, and you lose all perspective of what you are legally bound to do, then obviously you become confused by what the perceptions are and what you're actually going to do. You have a briefing with the president, and we were in this briefing with the president. Minister Nene did not attend the briefing. I was sent to take the letter to him, so I delivered the letter. I was the postman in the post box delivering a written letter from the president. The letter had been prepared by the presidency, not by me. So when I gave him the letter, I don't think he understood it. I told him that two ministers could not sign a letter to a president. And as the Minister of Finance, you should know that you cannot procure a nuclear deal through signing a letter to a president. Procuring nuclear is a whole lot more complex than that. So when he he refused to sign the letter, I communicated this to the president. But my name was also on the letter for me to sign. So if I refused to sign the letter, why would I try to force him to sign the letter when I refused to sign the letter? So
why did you refuse to sign the letter?
I did not prepare the letter. It was prepared by the presidency. And I disagreed with the contents of the letter. Because precisely for the fact that in terms of legality, there was no hope for such a letter. And in terms of the protocols, if a president signs communication to another head of state, it is done in a presidential minute, and there's a particular legal manner in which such international and global documents are signed.
And so you then say to him, I don't agree with the contents of the letter. That's why I've not signed it. Why would I force you? But that clearly didn't resonate with him, because right up to going to the State Capture Commission, he held a particular view of what your role was in all of this.
The conversation with Minister Nene, I don't think it was that he perceived it as very positive. Minister Nene also had that perception that I was a Zuma lackey.
And it's not only him, though. That's a perception that followed you for a very long time.
Yes, and that I was intent on signing a nuclear deal. But right from the start, there was nothing I did that was illegal. And I could discuss what happened. I could tell you what happened. But people kept on, instead of reading, very few people actually read what I was doing and understood what I was doing. And many people misled President Zuma. So I went according to the law. I followed the prescripts of the law. And I did not sign a corrupt nuclear deal.
Take us into your confidence. You're saying people misled the former president. How were people misleading the former president from, according to your perspective, what you could see at the time, being in the room?
I was the first intergovernmental agreement was signed during President Thabo Mbeki's time by the then Minister of International Relations, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. You could not procure through an intergovernmental agreement. The next intergovernmental agreement between South Africa and Russia was prepared for Minister Dipo-Peters. She did not sign it. The second agreement was prepared for Minister Ben Martins. So President Zuma had his advisor, Senti Topejani, in Minister Peters' office, in Minister Ben Martin's office, and he was given to me and I inherited him. He created the impression that you could sign a nuclear procurement. It's not a deal. That you could procure nuclear through an intergovernmental agreement. This was the impression they created. But you could not. So when I was confronted with this, we had the Dipo-Peters and the Ben Martins agreements. So to cancel any agreement, I took the risk, and I know what I did was illegal. I signed a Russian to English version, which was you signed two agreements. The one
in their language,
English,
and one in
their
yours.
language, and one in yours.
Sure.
You leave the agreement in their language. You leave in their country. The one in your language you take to your country. So the one from English to Russian did not give them a deal at all. I brought that back to South Africa.
But you left the Russians with the one you've signed off where there was a deal?
It was not a deal, but it gave them more leeway. This was the Ben Martins agreement, which was presented as a deal. You cannot have a deal through an intergovernmental agreement. So the Russian to English Ben Martin's version gave the Russians a whole lot more leeway. The copy which was prepared for De Boer Peters was a lesser and a more concise intergovernmental agreement. That is the one I brought to South Africa, took it through cabinet and passed it through the parliament. That is the one that was then taken to the country. But effectively, the two agreements would have cancelled each other out. So if you sign different agreements, because the two agreements, should be exactly a carbon copy of each other. Even in the translation, it has to be a carbon copy. The translation has to be exact.
You then say, you recognize you did something illegal in all of that. Do you then view yourself as somebody that should be hailed as a hero, having helped to not allow this nuclear deal to move in a particular manner? Because what I often find is that there's a question. People are up in the air as to whether or not to hail you as a villain or a hero in terms of the role you played during that nuclear period. How do you see yourself, never mind what Nhlanhla perceptions were, as Tina, looking at your actions, including these two different contracts? How do you see yourself in that period?
I'm always maintained that I was not for sale, and I would never be for sale. I'm not corrupt, and I would never. If you are corrupt, you must be corruptible. My country was not for sale. My country, I made it very clear that South Africa is a constitutional democracy with laws, with a constitution. That's why we are a constitutional democracy. And our country was not for sale. Whether you call me a hero, I'm not a superhero looking for a cape. I'm not a villain. I was committed to my country.
Tina, there's a school of thought, along with how people weigh your role at the time and who you are. There's a school of thought that if we had pushed ahead with it, had gone through the nuclear deal, made everything right and legal with that particular deal, that we wouldn't be where we are. You look at the country at the moment, you're a former energy minister. What is your sense? Do you think we lost out on something? Because if I recall correctly, part of the counter argument was we simply can't afford it. So push ahead would cripple the country. But again, some would want to argue, but look at where we are now. Are we not on our knees as a country? When you reflect on what's happened and what could have happened versus where we are, what comes to mind?
Our country needs nuclear, and at that time we had the integrated resource plan of 2010, but we did not need a corrupt nuclear deal. We did not need a corrupt nuclear deal that was going to cripple our economy. We needed to do not a deal. If you do a deal, in its very nature, a deal is perceived as corrupt.
Serious, yeah.
But we had to procure nuclear legally at a pace and scale and the price that our country could afford. So you couldn't sign 9.6 gigawatts off in the blink of an eye. You had to do it at a gradual pace. That is why we had to do it at the pace and the scale. You could not just do 9.6 gigawatts all at once. And then the price, you had to correct the price. And the price had to be affordable for our country. If you sign long-term procurement, the kind of procurements for energy, those procurements are long-term agreements. When I came into the Department of Energy, I did a thorough study of all the legal documents that governed the department. The Integrated Energy Act, the resource plan, the Integrated Resource Plan. Now, here the Electricity Regulation Act makes it very clear that the Department of Energy was not a department responsible for procurement. The Department of Energy was a policy-setting department. So you could not procure generation capacity for the country. The only manner in which you could procure generation capacity was through what we had grown, and what we had developed was the IPP, or the Independent Power Procurement Office. So the IPP, the independent power producers, those were the producers of renewable energy. If you look at what I did when I was the Minister of Energy, the most megawatts was brought online through the Department of Energy. Those megawatts were through renewable energy. The Independent Power Producers Officer we procured it through an Independent Power Producers Office. IPP office.
Because that's what allowed you to procure. The IPPs is how you're allowed to procure. Legally. Just to weigh in, let me quickly also ask you this, because I want to dip into some of the issues that we're dealing with as a country now versus that period where you were minister and what your understanding of them are. There's a back and forth that we've been seeing. I think the president is trying to navigate it now between two ministries, if you may, between public enterprises, where Eskom lies, versus Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. What is your sense of that back and forth, where people then say they feel part of our failure at the moment lies with what Gwede has failed to do? What is your sense of that argument around the two?
No, I do not have any opinions of
what's transpiring between the two departments.
No, I don't. I think you have to understand the roles of the two departments, but they also have conflicting roles.
Yes,
but overlapping roles.
Absolutely, I think that's where the fights come from.
Yes, but if you procure through the IPP office, you procure for a partnership between the private sector, between government and the private sector. These agreements have to be signed off by the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Energy, and Eskom, and the Minister of Public Enterprises. So there was one nuclear bid window period, the last one, where I had prepared it. It was ready to go out for procurement. But we could not procure because Eskom and the Minister of Public Enterprises did not sign it and refused to sign it. If it was signed then, those renewable energy projects, wind and solar, would have come online. But if two ministers refuse to sign it, then you're stuck as a Minister of Energy, because those agreements were based on finance, energy, and public enterprises, as well as Eskom signing it.
So it's an issue of cooperation in essence from different departments.
And likewise, why would I then want to force the Minister of Finance to sign a nuclear deal when I needed him to sign everything off that I would want to do?
So it would be self-sabotage in your eyes. I want to again speak about personal anguish. You spoke about how you felt over the past years with this matter hanging over your head before the ethics committees now cleared you, Tina. But I want to speak about the personal anguish and personal sacrifice of that period where you were in Russia. I think there's something you said to me offline about some of your experiences that happened during that period. I don't know if you're willing to delve into it now.
I carried the burden of this nuclear monkey on my back for nearly 10 years. I did not go to trial. I was not called by the Zondo Commission. I was not found guilty in any court of law, and I was not found guilty of anything by Judge Zondo. Yet I always carried a dark cloud over my head. I've always been perceived as corrupt. The State Capture Commission has not found me. That was what Judge Zondo was supposed to do. It did not find me guilty of anything. Yet I was perceived as being part of state capture. It tainted my name. as I said, I repeat, my name was dragged through the mud. My legacy and my name was at stake. That is why I stayed to clear my name. It's only about my name. My children carry my name. It's about their legacy for my grandchildren and my children. If you go online and you look at any digital platform, the digital footprint that I have is one of being corrupt, and it will stay there even if I pass away.
So is there a need for you now to try and clear your name? Is that what you're attempting to do now? This conversation? Is that it?
I just want to set the record straight, and I want my side of the story to be heard, because even though I haven't been found guilty through a court of law, I remain guilty. And I actually have no future. I have no future. I haven't had any future for a long time. I haven't had much of a life, because nationally and internationally, nobody is prepared to do business with you. Nobody is prepared to do business or anything with a corrupt individual. So you cannot sit on a board of directors. Companies, private companies, generally do not want to be associated with corruption. So what do I have? Politics it's not an easy position to be in. So what happened was, it more often than not, if you have this dark cloud, perceived dark cloud hanging over your head, it's used against you. No matter whether you're corrupt or not, it's used against you. The cloud appears, disappears, and reappears like the weather. So if it's convenient for people to tarnish your name, then you would have a cloud. But when it's convenient for them, you do not have a cloud. So those associated with me have been really, those who worked for me have suffered. My children would have a lesson at school where the teacher would speak about this corrupt nuclear deal I signed. And they were harassed, they were bullied, they were victimized, they were traumatized. I think that I owe it to my children to clear my name, because I'm clearing their name for future generations. And when I showed them the letter of the ethics committee, they said, "We knew you didn't do it. And we always believed in you." And that was a vindication, not the ethics committee. Just them saying it, even though they supported me. I had to come to a position where I had to accept that I was raped in Russia. It was extremely painful. I had to speak to my children about it. So the stereotypes of being raped, unfortunately, is always there. It's now that I speak about it that I have the very same reactions from women who proclaim and profess to be fighting gender-based violence and femicide, using the exact same arguments against me.
What arguments are being used against you when you say you were raped in Russia?
There was one honorable member of the Democratic Alliance, a male, and he said, because you didn't report it, it's actually not a plausible situation.
Okay.
And this is what, if you take too long, this is what, I don't think I am a survivor. I'm a fighter, because every day I've had to fight.
I mean, you are then the story that you relay about not being believed or being told and reported, I think is what women face every single day, the world over. There are many things I want to dissect from what you said. Let's speak about this violation, for instance. When did it happen? Is this during the nuclear period when you were in Russia? How did you navigate that? Who did you talk to? I want to also try and understand that particular aspect of this violation.
I'm not ready to delve into what happened. And that is what you should respect, not you as an individual. But generally, if a rape survivor or a fighter, you're not a survivor because you don't survive every day. You fight your demons every day. When you get into court and people ask you, why didn't you report it? Why have you taken so long to speak about it? I know exactly why I didn't report it. I wasn't ready for my name to be published all over. I wasn't ready for the spat, but I reported it to senior people. And they really deliberately did not pay attention to it. So I'm not ready to speak about that.
I can respect that, Tina. I can respect not being ready to speak about it.
I'm not going to speak about it.
I can accept that. But I want you to help me understand, how do you then make sense of, you say you reported it to senior leaders, right? Assumably in government. How do you make sense of that? And you need to, as you answer that, please consider this, that we are a country that's under siege at the moment, right? And the feeling that most of us have is that there is no political will to help us deal with gender-based violence, including incidents of rape. So if you, a senior leader in government, say you told seniors and you didn't feel that there was something that they wanted to entertain or to hear you as you reported it, then how must we make sense of our battle against the siege in our own country?
I think we have a long way to go. As I said, when I started speaking about it, I would have senior members, political leaders, telling me to stop speaking about it because I was being ridiculed. So
a long way to go.
We have a very long way to go. I am the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Police, and I will leave no stone unturned to have the amendment of the South African Police Act, which would allow a legal process to fast track the processes of assisting women who have been sexually abused in any way, including the girl child, the boy child, and notwithstanding the fact that men and the LGBTQI plus community face the same challenges. That's one of the reasons why I'm speaking out now.
I want to speak. Go on.
And if you still have society and senior members of society not understanding the or theoreticizing about the question of sexual abuse, then we are still a long way from really attempting to deal with the matter.
I agree with that. Talk to me about, I want to go back to the issue of perceptions that you're trying to also face off with. The perception that you're corrupt, that you say you're fighting. To me, though, Tina, it's not just linked to the issue of the nuclear deal. People will then bring in the issue of the oil reserves. Do you recognize that when people want to make claims of you being corrupt, when they attach your name to malfeasance in government, that they're not looking at just one issue? Do you recognize that they look at what they think is a pattern of behavior and find you wanting in that regard?
The sale of the case of the sale of the strategic stock was dealt with in the Western Cape High Court, the Western Cape Division of the High Court. And Judge Rogers did not find me guilty of anything. That was the case of setting aside the sale. Judge Rogers set aside the sale. That judgment is available. I was not found guilty of anything in that judgment. The stock had not left the country. The sale was reversed. So it was basically if the sale did not come into effect because I placed a moratorium on the oil leaving the country. This oil was eventually sold by Minister Mantashe last year. So, just after COVID.
They would have been around last year.
Yes. If Minister Mantashe had oil to sell, where did he suddenly find the oil from if I sold it? It's logical. If I sold the oil, there would be nothing in the tanks. Yes, there was malfeasance. Yes, those responsible for the malfeasance are not punished, still remain unpunished today. And my name has not been cleared. But a judge did not find me guilty. Court of law did not find me guilty. Judge Zondo did not bring it to the Zondo Commission. But I'm guilty. I remain a suspect. When the Hawks supplied me with forensic investigations, they did not find me guilty. So if the Hawks tell me that I'm not a suspect, then I have no fear about my guilt or innocence. I wish to bring that sale to the ethics committee as well.
All right. And then when we speak about the comment you made that nobody wants to touch you, nobody wants to do business with a so-called corrupt individual, you're trying to remedy this now for your children, you say. What is the future, though? I mean, you are in the ANC. For me, there's an ANC Women's League in terms of in the political space. I'm now moving into the political space that you're in. What is the future there? Because part of what I think is unfolding is there's a reemergence of Tina in the body politics of the ANC. And I don't know what that means in terms of, do we see you occupying more positions? Your name was a surprise to people at the conference last year. What should we read of that?
That is again perceptions. If we have a perception,
everything is about perceptions.
Yes,
everything is optics, Tina.
Yes, absolutely. So if you have the perception that this is a corrupt person that has been buried, and the person emerges as having the threshold for nominations from the floor, obviously you're going to be surprised because you don't know.
I don't want to lie. I was there. We were.
So there were other people who were nominated from the floor and they received 4 votes. These are people who were openly campaigning. I didn't run a campaign. I didn't pay anybody. But I reached the threshold and my name was there for a few hours before the votes. I don't think I did too badly. But for me, if you want to know why I stood, I stood for the matter of the non-racialism of the ANC.
Which is a characteristic many are saying the ANC is slowly losing.
And if you know why I'm still in the ANC, is because I believe, and I joined the ANC, because of a non-racial, non-sexist, fighting for a non-racial, non-sexist and a democratic South Africa. It is contained in the 2nd clause of the Constitution of the ANC that we fight against apartheid and replace apartheid with a non-racial, non-sexist and a democratic South Africa.
Do you share the view, though, that the ANC is losing that character, that non-racial character?
I was afraid that is the case. I was afraid. That is why I I stood for elections. I wasn't afraid. It would have been absolutely against the political fiber of the ANC not to have a non-racial National Executive Committee.
Where to for Tina? I am wrapping up. Where to for Tina? There's an ANC Women's League that's got no leadership. It's got an interim task team that's helping prepare for a conference. What does the future hold for you within the governing party? And obviously you're trying to clear your name so that you can, as you said, have a future outside. Where to next?
I am a member of the National Executive Committee and the National Working Committee of the ANC. Which holds a tremendous lot of responsibility. And I've been that for a very long time. I think that the last part of what I really am fighting for is to leave my reputation intact, but also to leave a non-racial ANC and country intact.
All right, thank you.
I am a member of the National Task Team of the Women's League.
Yes, I'm aware.
My role as a National Task Team member is to take the Women's League to conference. We will not spend years and years taking that Women's League to conference. It will be done. Our preliminary date is the end of April. If not, it will be extended. I hope it will not. And if you want to know what that means, that would mean a victory for the struggles of women. And that would be a vindication of what I have gone through, the burden I've carried, not as a victim, but as a fighter. And I'd support all women who can fight.
Are you open to taking a leadership position, though?
That's as all ANC politicians will say, that's up to the branches. The branches voted for me at Nazareth.
I think it's 2023 and ANC must change tact. I think that gimmick is a little bit old.
It's not.
So you must come out and say, be direct. Would you be open to being elected president of the Women's League, Secretary General? A little bit more direction, a little bit more boldness from ANC leaders for once would be refreshing when it comes to elections.
It's very refreshing that I did not have any campaign for Nazareth. I did not have any posters. I did not have social media campaigns. Yet the branches elected me. So what will happen to the Women's League, as we had in the ANC, is that a new generation has to come in.
Before I let you go, very quickly, your thoughts about the ANC president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa. Does he stick it out? Will he stay on? Will he finish his term? Are there concerns on your part as Tina, he's your president, in whether or not he'll finish his term or we'll see the back of him before his 5 years are up?
I have the greatest respect for President Ramaphosa. And we elected him for a 5-year term. And that is what we elected him, because we believed in him. And unless I'm proven otherwise, I would respect him and I would wish him well and wish that he completes his term of office. And also fight for him to do that. Also, you'll fight for him to complete his term of office, because there are people, even within the party, who don't want him to finish his term of office. But that's a story for another day. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. That's Tina Joemat-Peterson speaking about that controversial nuclear deal. What did you do? What did you not do? Speaking about the personal cost of that period. And of course, her bid to clear her name, saying that a corrupt individual has no future. And she's lived with that for many years. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you next week. This podcast was produced by Kamakwini Mavovana and Duduzile Masuku. For Eyewitness News, my name is Tshidi Madia.